Hello everyone, it's Kevin from kjdElectronics, and welcome back to another one-stop programming video for absolute beginners on Python. In the last video, we went over function return values, functions with multiple arguments, and a brief introduction to debugging. I also challenged everyone to come up with the subtraction, multiplication, and division functions that we'll be using in our calculator that we're working on. So I just want to go over those functions real quick before we get into the content for this video. So we have our add function that simply has our doc string, returns num1 plus num2, and then we return num1 plus num2 using the addition operator. Next, we have our subtraction function, which returns num1 minus num2 and returns num1 minus 1, 2 using the subtraction operator. Similarly, multiply takes two arguments, num1 and num2, returns num1 times num2 using the multiplication operator, which is the asterisk. And last, the division function, or div, which takes two arguments, num1 and num2, that returns num1 divided by num2 using the division operator, or the slash. So we're going to go ahead and use those functions in this video. If you didn't get the chance to implement those before watching this video, I recommend you pause and implement those now. So in this video, we're going to discover how to get input from the user so we can actually get what numbers we want to operate on from the user during the program execution. And in order to do that, we're also going to learn about variable types. So let's get right into it and learn about the input function. So in our main function, we're going to make a call to the input function. And now what the input function does is it takes one argument called the prompt. When you call the input function, it prompts the user with the prompt that you give it in the console. It then waits for the user to press enter, and it returns whatever the user typed into the console as the return function, or the return value for the function. So to use that, I'm just going to create a variable called my name. I'm going to set that equal to the input function with the prompt, what is your name? ? Here's the input function, input. It takes a single argument that is a string, what is your name? So this is kind of like the print function that takes a string that it prints. The input function will also print this prompt out to the screen, except it will wait until the user presses enter before it returns, and it will return the value that was entered in the console. So we're also going to do a print statement, print my name, so we get to see what the value of my name is set by the input function. So we're going to go ahead and run this. It's going to ask, what is your name, in alignment with this prompt. And if I click down here in the console, it's going to give me a cursor where I can type Kevin. And now it's still going to wait until I press enter, at which point it's going to print Kevin back out to me. And then it's going to do our addition, adding 1 plus 1, and printing the result. So now let's try to use this for our calculator. Let's say num1 equals what is number 1? ? And then let's do another input immediately following that. What is number 2? ? And we'll name that variable num2. We can then get rid of this print function and call our add function with num1 and num2. So let's go ahead and run that and see what happens. So what is number 1? Let's say it's 1. What is number 2? Let's give it 2. So when I press enter, I expect to see the result of 1 plus 2. I should see 3. I see 12. Now that's not like a calculator that I've ever used. What if we tried changing this to use our multiplication function? What would happen then? So now we're doing my result is multiplication of num1 and 1, 2. Let's run it again. Let's do 1 and 2 again. 1, 2. So we should get 1 times 2 is 2, right? And here we get an exception that says type error, can't multiply sequence by non-int of type string, or str. So this is where we have to learn about types. And in order to illustrate this more clearly, I'm going to open up the Python console. Now to do that, there's a couple different ways. So I'm going to go down here to Start, and I'm going to type CMD to open a command prompt. I'm then going to open up a command prompt, and I'm going to type Python. It's then going to launch Python 3.6.1, which is the version that I have, and then give us this 3 little triangles or greater than signs. This indicates that you are in a Python console. I'm also going to show you 2 other ways of opening this in case you have problems typing Python in command prompt. So if you type Python down in the search, you should be able to open up the Python desktop app, which will just launch a Python console, and you see we get these 3 little triangles to indicate that we're in the Python console. If you type Python again, you might also see idle, which is kind of like the default stock IDE that comes with Python. And when that launches, you'll also see these 3 greater than signs indicating the Python console. If you can get any of these to work, you're all set. So I'm going to use the command prompt version. If you remember, in a previous video, I said Python is an interpreted language. That means that it's run line by line in order. So what that means is we can actually bring this over here, and we can try to run through our program line by line in the console and be able to get a better idea of what it's doing. So let's just type input, enter a number, and press enter. So now we see that we don't have these 3 triangles anymore. So this is actually the function running. So enter a number, and let's do 1. So now on the next line, it prints the result of that function, what input returned. If you notice, it returned a string in single quotation marks. Now, here's another fun fact about Python, is there is no difference between a string in double quotes and a string in single quotes. Now to illustrate that, I can just type Kevin with double quotes into the console and press enter. And you can see that that immediately just turns it into Kevin with single quotes. So there is no difference in Python between a double quoted string and a single quoted string. But now let's get back to the fact that we need a number to operate on, because I can't do 1 times 2 as strings. It says can't multiply sequence by non-int of type string. That's basically Python saying this is a string, I don't know how to operate on that. It'd be the same as trying to say Kevin times 6. That actually worked. That's very interesting. Now this is where Python gets interesting in that I wasn't expecting that to work, but it did. And that's just something that you can just play around this console and sometimes get unexpected results. So what if we tried division? What would happen? We get an error because it can't figure out a way to do that. What if we tried subtraction? And now I'm just interested to see what else works. Error. And if we tried addition, we also get an error. But what we had before with our 1 plus 2 equals 12 is we can add strings to strings. So if I say Kevin, the string Kevin plus the string 6, I'll get Kevin 6 back. What do we need to do to turn 6 into an integer that we can operate on? So if I just type 6 plus 6, I get 12, which is the expected result of that arithmetic operation. So we need to turn the input that's in a string format from the input function into an integer so we can operate on it using our arithmetic operators, add, subtract, multiply, and divide. And the way you do that is by casting the string to an integer by using the int function. So the int function takes a string and returns an integer if it's a valid string that it can parse into an integer. So for example, if I typed int 6, I get the, notice, no double or single quoted string. This is the number 6. I could type int 6 plus int 6. And notice these are in single quoted strings. Now this should be 12, because what's going to happen is this is going to resolve to the integer 6, and this is going to resolve to the integer 6, which it can then operate on. And we get 12 as expected. We're down in command prompt, and I guess we all learned something, because we learned that I can multiply a string and have it repeat a certain number of times by multiplying that by an integer. I don't know where that'd be useful, but it's definitely very cool. So we're going to close the console. And now what we're going to do is we're going to cast the value from our input function to an integer. So to do that, we're going to type the int function, and we're going to pass the value of whatever is returned from our input function. And we're going to do that for both num1 and num2. So now, when we run the program, it's going to ask for number 1. I'm going to press or enter 1. It's going to ask for number 2, and I'll enter 2. And now we get 2 back. And that's because we're multiplying 1 times 2 using our mul function, which is the expected result. So let's simplify this a little bit and test out all of our arithmetic functions by just printing the results directly. So let's do print add num1 comma num2, and let's just copy this line 3 more times and change this to subtract, mul, and divide. So now we should be able to see the output from all 4 of our functions at the same time. So let's do 5 and 5. So we should get 10, 0, 25, and 1. 10, 0, 25, and 1.0. We're not actually getting an integer back when we use the divide operator. So this is returning a decimal type, which isn't an integer type. We could recast this to an integer type. We don't really need to. I know that was a lot rather quickly. So to summarize what we learned in this video, we learned that when we call the input function that uses a prompt, it prompts that to the console and waits for the user to enter something and press enter. That then returns a string type of whatever the user input into the console. If we're asking the user for a number, we need to call the integer function to parse that value into an integer type so that we can run arithmetic operations on it. We also learned that we can add 2 strings together when we added num1 as 1 and num2 as 2, and we got the result 12 back. That was because we were passing a string into our add function, which was adding the string 1 to the string 2, and we were getting 12. We also learned, through a stroke of luck, we can multiply a string by an integer and have that string repeated X number of times. That was something that I learned in this video, so that just proves that you learn something new every day. In the next video, we're going to learn about conditionals and Boolean operations so that we can make our calculator a little bit more responsive and a little bit more useful in that it won't run all of the operations at once. We'll be able to say, I want to add, I want to subtract, I want to multiply, or I want to divide. All right, thanks for watching. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe. I'm Kevin from kjdElectronics, and I'll see you in the next video.